So let's say that my observation of deer number 19's behavior is that she crossed the border on November 20th in the afternoon. So she's here in Quebec at 1500 hours and back in Maine at 1800. And then she seems to bed down and not move at all until about 9 o'clock the next day. Over the course of that day, she moves one township over and seems to stop again. From there, she's moving down, 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 crossing a few more townships. Looks like stopping again for the night, moving again the next day. Over the course of a few days, making it to where she spends the winter. So we can say the period of observation where we have this behavior we're interested in went back to, November the 20th. There we go, back to 1500 hours where she starts in Quebec and ends here, back in Maine. Now we're working with a subset of this whole data set, these selected points, and I want to show a map that highlights those. And I can't just make the map with the selected features, it doesn't seem to work out well in this software. So I need to right-click, export, save features as, and create a new layer that's only those selected ones. So save only the selected features. I'm going to save in the format Esri shapefile, and the file name I'm going to make deer 19 winter movement 1.shp. Okay, and now I'm keeping the same coordinate reference system, CRS, and adding the save file to the map. Okay, and now it hasn't shown up very well because the color is similar, but if I make that a brighter color, let's try a bright green. Okay, see how annoying that can be. There it is. Now I can go ahead and make my map. So project, new print layout, deer winter movement, title already exists, 1. Okay, and now I have to add the map here. So click that, up to the top left corner, see how it snaps, click, hold, drag, and release to the opposite corner there. Rendering map, thank you very much. To zoom in, I can adjust my scale. So see right here, I'm at 1 to 232,759, which means that 1 inch on the map equals 282,759 inches on the ground. Let's try a 1 to 200,000 scale, see how that works. A bit better. Let's try 180,000. Bit better still. Try 150,000. That's a bit too far in, so let's try 160. There we go, that seems to do it, and I want to move item content, which means move that around a little bit, so that I have all those features on the map. Now, if I was to print this out, I would need to leave a margin for the printer. Printers don't like to go all the way up to the edge, but this is going to be a digital format. It's going to be inserted into a Word document, which will have its own margins applied. So to have a margin on the map and a margin on the document, you'd end up being all margin and no map. The general object of the game is to have as much of the map's area filled up with useful information as possible. If this was made zoomed all the way out, there would be extra things that are not providing any kind of context to the interpretation of this observation. So rule number 1, map content fills the page. Now let's add the legend. That's this button right here with the yellow, red, and blue squares. Add legend. Click, hold, drag, and release a box about where you want the legend to go, and that's a nice area for it. And you see what a mess this is to begin with. This is a lot of extraneous information that we simply don't need. And some of these are much, much, much too long, creating a huge legend that's just an absolute mess. So we need to fix this. How do we start? First of all, uncheck Auto Update. That gives us access to these buttons down here. So we have deer number 19 transparent. That doesn't need to be on the legend. We can't see it. So we can hit this red minus here, remove it from the legend, and away it goes. Now this reads directly from this. So if I right-click and, let's see, where is that? Rename layer, and call that deer 19 winter movement. So remove the underscores, make it look like an actual nice thing there. If we go back to here, see it's not doing that automatically, but I can update that, Dear 19 winter movement, but it's moved that back in there, so I don't want to do that. I can also double click on any one of these and change the label to anything I want it to be. So Dear 19 all observations. Back, and there it is. Now, not everybody agrees precisely on where to draw the line between items you include in the legend and items you consider to be intuitively obvious. To me, these are streams. These are obviously streams, they're blue, they look like streams, they're flowing down from mountains, they're collecting into large rivers. I don't need to have them in my legend. So I'm going to click on that, remove, and doesn't that look so much better already? Now you'll notice that everything in the table of contents, everything in the layers panel here, exists in this legend. Is that necessary? No, all of these aren't even turned on. They're unchecked, they're not being displayed. There's a quick way to make those go away, and that is to check the box that says only show items inside the linked map, meaning if you can't see it, don't put it on my legend. That simplifies things tremendously. Now I just have to clean up this main township 24 to shorelines. Double click, main, oh come now, you can do it. Main town boundaries. Being a little bit slow there, but we'll get there. Oh boy, that's not happy. Double click, delete, you can do it. Delete one more space, back to there, now we're good. This element in the legend is debatable, where some people would leave the elevation model right out of the legend, because intuitively obvious colors, lower elevation down where the streams are collecting into rivers, higher elevation on the obvious mountains, and this is not actually displaying precise elevation values. It's displaying the lowest elevation in the dataset as blue, and that happens to be 159 meters above sea level, and the highest one as 681, but there's ranges in between here. I think in this case this is useful as a point of reference. It's not precise, but it's useful. So we can keep it, but I need to change that state 10 meter DEM raster copy to something that actually makes sense. And to do that, I need to figure out which one of all these statewide 10 meter DEM raster copies is the right one. And that's not the best because I have several of them. But because it's displaying that way, I can open that up and see that's what it is. So I can double click on this and say elevation meters, because that's what it is. There we go, and there it is. So now I can just go ahead and move that up to the top corner where it makes sense, and I can just fill that area right up, so now I have the legend filling that space that was blank anyhow. Next I need a scale bar, and that is add scale bar here, and like everything else, click, hold, drag, release where you want it. And here it's defaulting to kilometers, and we have the ability to customize over here. For this map, let's say we want to use miles, so we can use the drop down here and find miles. There we go, and now that makes a scale bar that makes perfect sense by default, which is actually very nice. In some other programs, the default is to some absolutely absurd values like 2.758312 miles instead of a round number like 2.5, and the first thing I have to teach you is how to fix that. Here, it actually gives you a perfectly good usable scale bar right there by default. So if I want to go back and modify the scale bar, I click on that there. If I want to modify the legend, it gives me those options. The map itself here. Let's look back at the scale bar, see what other options we have, and we can select the color, we can select the line style, select all sorts of things, but really this default is quite nice and good enough to be getting on with. Next, let's add a north arrow, and that is that one there. Click, hold, drag, release the box for the north arrow. And with north arrow selected, we can go into app symbols and arrows. And arrows, we have an east declination and a west declination. We want west. Make that a little bit bigger here, and that indicates that true north is aligned with the page here. So these are, of course, north-south boundary lines here, drawn north, south, east, west in grids, but the actual magnetic north is 17 degrees west. And if you don't know your declination, you can use the magneticdeclination.com. That works fine. And it's giving it 4 right there, but let's see if it allows us to move that. So you clicked here, 16 degrees, 14 minutes. So I was thinking it was 17, turns out to be 16, and this does change over time. So we're looking about here, and we want a 16 degree, 11 minute west declination. 16 degrees is fine, we don't need to include the minutes here. So now I want to add a text label to this indicating this is a 16 degree west declination. So I can use my create text label here, click, hold, drag the box where I want it, change good old lorem ipsum to -16 W. I'm going to put that on another line to be fancy, declination, and I'm going to make that a center alignment. So it looks like so. I need to make that a little bit bigger so it has the space it needs, and then I'm going to center that. So now I have a label there and there. What I don't like about this is that this text overlaps with that boundary. That's not very nice. So I'm actually going to move this up to the top left. Nice to have those things tucked away so you can find them if you need them. Then I'm using that center box there. And remember, this text is centered in its spot there, with the horizontal alignment there. So that white box lines up with the center line of that north arrow and will be aligned perfectly. Now I have a north arrow, a scale bar, and a legend. Next up I need a title. Back to the text here, and the title should be the biggest text on the page, if possible centered on the page itself, but not overlapping any of the map contents. Never sacrifice map content for text. The text is moved and worked around the main subject. So I'm going to call this Dear 19 Winter Migration. And I'm going to make that a centered alignment, and now I'm going to change the font until it's pretty well filling up that space. So let's see. Try size 24. We can do a bit bigger than that. And I like Times New Roman just because I do. You don't have to use that. That's my preference. Okay. Make that a bit bigger. Try 36. Okay. That's looking pretty good right there. But now I have a sloppy thing. I have one font for my title, another font for this text label. So now I have to go back there, change that to Times New Roman. Good. And then I have this legend here. Let's see if it allows me to do that. All of these, very good. So now I just have to change all of those to match Times New Roman. And that's something I'm willing to do because I like Times New Roman. You can just go with the default and it will be the same thing all around, but that's how I like it to be. And now that's changed everything. So you see I'm paying the price of wanting things a particular way, but easy enough to fix. And if I'm making a document all typed in Times New Roman, I want my map to match. I have one more thing down here I need to fix. Let's go ahead and find where that lives. And that's going to be in, let's see, got to be display. And where is that font? Very good. Change that font to Times New Roman. And you see how that display is different. That's probably just old code, and that's how things are from time to time. So now we're all hunky-dory good. So we've got all our fonts correct. And again, that's a personal preference thing. If I'm making a map to go in a document that's Times New Roman, I want it to all match. Some people get fussy about that. It is what it is. But if you're just making a map for me to go and submit for an assignment, you can use whatever font you want, use the default, and go the same all the way through. Just don't go mixy-matchy on your fonts. Pick one, go with it. Now I need something to indicate where in the world we are. These township boundaries happen to have labels, or at least an attribute that we can use as a label. So let's right-click, Properties, Labels, instead of no labels, single labels, and the value is going to be town. So let's go ahead and hit apply and see what we get, and now we get big old town name labels. We don't want it to be quite that big, so we can change the font size here, change it to be a little bit smaller. I don't want this to be the main subject of the map. I want it to be there when I look for it, but not grabbing the eye. That also means that I can set some opacity here, and anything underneath can sort of show through. Now we have some town labels. Let's hit OK and see what we have. So we have the town of Allagash here. Its H is kind of hidden by that point, but overall we're not doing badly here. So we have St. John Plantation, St. Francis, T18R10 Wells, T18R11 Wells, T19R11 Wells, and then Big 20. This is the grid system, common in the American West and the North Maine Woods. Wells stands for west of the easterly line of the state, which is of course over there, and then we have the township numbers going up as you go north and the range getting larger as you go west. And some of them get names like Big 20, there's a Big 10 down there, but most of these unincorporated townships just have township range west of the easterly line of the state. Looking back to our map, we do have to check the button or press the refresh. Thank you very much. Took a moment there. Now looking at this, I can see the Allagash label is now really seriously overlapping with these data. I want to fix that somehow. Back to the main township, 24 Shorelines, double click or right click and go to Properties, Labels. So we have some options here to add a buffer, add a mask. Let's try a buffer and see what that looks like. So you see how it's added that in there. That can be a bit obtrusive. We can change the opacity down here so we can still see it, but it's not quite as eye-grabbing. And again, you're probably noticing a trend here where I don't want these things to grab the eye. When you're looking at a map, the main subject should be the one that grabs your eye, the one you see first. This actually looks pretty okay. I'm going to uncheck that for now and show you some other options. Add mask, apply. Let's see. That doesn't seem to have done a whole lot for it. Add background. You can draw a background and get it like that. So I can see a square background, a little different from your buffer. And we can use this expand outwards. See, watch how it's right up against the edge of that label there. Expand that, now you have a square. That's to some people's taste, not others, that's fine. And we can also go down here and use the opacity slider. Apply, not bad. We can also use a shadow here, draw a drop shadow, let's apply there. See how it has a little bit of a pop to it. So let's uncheck that and apply. Add the drop shadow back in and apply. So you see what that does? I don't think it's terribly effective in this situation, but it can look very nice against a white background. I've never used a GIS that can really place labels properly around features like this. You have the option to just not use automatic labels and place them manually, but I think the best thing to do is just go ahead with the buffer, apply that. That looks pretty good to me. Let's see how it looks on the map. Okay, and to our map and refresh. Thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it. There it is, and that's the preview. Let's see how it looks when I export the map. So let's go ahead and export that as a PDF. Dear Winter Movement number 1. Okay, create geospatial PDF because why not? And let that load up. Exporting, exporting, exporting. And when finished exporting, we have our link to open that up, and that is what we get out the other end. So there's Allagash, and that actually looks pretty alright to me. Now I'm seeing an issue here where my scale bar, its text overlaps with that other text, so I want to fix that. That looks pretty good. All these other labels are good. And an issue here, I have this overlap with a line, so I think I'll add some background to the title as well. And I also see as I was going back and forth, this has gone back to saying Main Township 24 to Shoreline. So I'm going to go to my legend, I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to call that Main Town Boundaries. Think, you can do it. Okay, and now that's back the way I wanted it. So I can click off there, that's fixed. Next, I wanted to change this, and let's see what I can do with that. I think the best option for me is going to go down and give it a background color here. And I can see how close that is to the edge there. I'm just going to use those white boxes, drag that out a little bit so it's just a little bit of a margin there around that. That looks pretty alright. Next, I had this issue with the 0 on the scale bar overlapping that text label. So let's go ahead and just move that down out of the way. Now we don't have that overlap. That looks good. We are overlapping a little bit with that stream there. And if I want to get fancy with it, I can click on that and go into its background here. Give that a background. And there we go. I can place that so it's either right up against or has a even margin on both sides. If it was sort of like that, you see how sloppy that looks, having all that extra space here but being close there. Keeping those margins about equal makes it look a lot better. And like most other things, you can set a bit of transparency on that color. So let's go ahead and do that. So I just clicked on that. Now I have this opacity slider. If I want to make it stand out but still be able to see a bit of what is underneath, that's how we can do that. Likewise with the title, if that's just too much, I can go in here to the background, open that up, click on the color, and move that opacity slider until it stands out without really just looking like a huge block. Let's export this again and see how we're looking. So layout, and I'm actually going to save as an image this time, because remember earlier I said I wanted to plop this into a Word document rather than a standalone thing. So I'm going to save this as a PNG, which of course can't have georeferencing information, it's just a picture. So save, 300 dots per inch. I'm going to go with the defaults, that's going to be just fine. Save, think, and in a moment we'll have our map. Now this is looking pretty good to me. So we have a slight, very slight, issue where the frame of the legend is just barely overhanging that white space, so I'm going to fix that. The rest of this looks good. It could be done to include the lakes and ponds layer. That would make that fill up a little bit with Bow Lake and Glacier Lake here. So I'm going to fix this just a little bit. There we go, job done there. And now I want to make this map, export a final version of this, and then we're going to make several more maps showing the aspect and other raster layers you've already created. So I'm going to go Layout, Export as Image. I'm going to save that as Deer Movement DM Hillshade. Enter. Keep the defaults, save, and let that go. So I'm happy with that. Very good. So I'm going to go back here, I'm going to minimize that, and I'm going to save my project. Now I want to make the next map, and that's going to be the aspect map. So there's the aspect, and I'm going to uncheck both of these. And see how massively overwhelming that is to the eye. I'm going to set some transparency on that so I can see where my points are. Transparency, dial that back quite a lot. Apply, a touch more, apply, there. I can still see and interpret all those colors, but I can also see everything else that they were previously overwhelming. And if I wanted to be really creative, I could use that transparency to show the hillshade model through that. That is a little bit dark, so what I'm going to do is go in here and go to the Symbology tab, and let's see what I can do with our color rendering. Let's turn the brightness up a bit, see what that does. Not bad. Let's turn it up a little bit more. That's looking pretty alright, so let's go with that. Now we're showing terrain and aspect, and we can still see our streams and rivers fairly well. So let's go back to our map, and remember we have to hit the refresh view button. and that will bring everything up to its current extent. There we go, very good. So that has automatically removed the elevation model because it's no longer being displayed. And remember, in our legend we said only show items that are linked inside of the map. So aspect, I just want to change that to say degrees, close parentheses. Once that finishes loading there, I don't know why that's so slow, but just give that time. Aspect degrees, everything else is good, everything else is good. Layout, export as image, and we're going to do that as DEM aspect hillshade. Save, and save. There's that map, everything looks good right where we left it, and we can see the reason why I wanted to have this hillshade in here is that it really does matter an awful lot if it's steep ground with a particular aspect or if it's flat ground with a particular aspect. Where a north-facing slope that's a 2% grade doesn't matter at all if it's north-facing or south-facing. But if it's a very steep ridge like this, the north side is going to be substantially different from the south side, or the east side from the west side. So on steep ground, this will be sunny in the morning, sunny in the afternoon, shaded in the afternoon, shaded in the morning. But if it's on flat ground, well, it doesn't really matter unless it's in the shadow of a hill. So there's map number 2. Let's go ahead and close that, minimize that, uncheck hillshade, we won't need it for the next one, and uncheck aspect. And now let's go ahead and check on slope. And we have another case of massively overwhelming color, which is something we want, again, for context when we look for it, but not the thing that just hits you in the face when you open the map. So to the transparency tab, try about 50% and see how that looks. That's looking not bad, but it's such a powerful bit of color. Let's keep turning that down and see what it looks like. That's not bad. Let's try, for round numbers here, 33-ish%. And of course we can go 33.3 if we're being like that. Apply. So 1/3, 33% of the original color. That looks good to me. So now let's go to our map again and hit our refresh button to load in that new background layer and our new item into the legend here. So slope, again, the only thing we have to change on this map is go to the legend and see where it says slope. We just have to say slope in percent because that's what it is. And then we can, once that loads, go back. There it is, layout, export as image, and that does not include hillshade because of course it includes slope, and hillshade and slope are kind of related to each other. So that's just going to be slope. Enter, save. So now just by switching on different layers, we have 3 different maps that show different contexts to this trip across the northern part of the state. There's our aspect model, there's our elevation and hillshade, and there's our slope. And just for good measure, let's go ahead and make one with just the air photo. So there's our NAPE 2015. We're going to have some blank areas, that's fine. Let's go ahead here, refresh this, and we'll make our last map. And that doesn't show up on there as anything because, well, it ought not to, because it's just an air photo. You could add a label in here saying this is a 2015 air photo, which would be an appropriate thing to do. So let's just go ahead and add in there, instead of good old lorem ipsum, NAPE 2015 1 meter resolution. So we used to get 1 meter resolution, now we have 60 centimeter resolution, so that's a 2-foot pixel size versus a 3-foot pixel size. Good stuff. And that is pretty good. Let's just change that font to match the rest. Times New Roman, thank you. And that will do. So now let's go ahead and layout, export as image, deer movement, and NAPE 2015, save, wait. And that gives you the best possible view of the landscape as she experienced it in terms of the forest management surrounding her movement. And now you can drag and drop these images straight into a Word doc. You can give them captions by right-clicking Insert Caption here, and you can type whatever analysis or other information you want to around them. So that is, again, you see how we have this margin here. If I'd put a margin on this map, then the map itself would be filling in a space like this, instead of the full page less the print margin that the document needs. Key lesson here being that once you have these layers developed and symbolized, you can quickly check different layers on and off and produce very different maps in very short order. So for your assignment, I don't want to see an exact copy of this showing the same winter movement. I want you to find something interesting in the dataset that you find interesting. Could be something that happened in the first winter, the second winter, during the summer. Could be 3 points showing how she moved in a day. Could be a point that she returned to once, several times throughout the summer. Could be any number of things. There's all sorts of interesting things in this data set. Explore, enjoy, learn about the deer, and develop some observation that would lead into a hypothesis about what it is she's doing on the landscape and why.